Okay, we're going to continue refactoring our code to make use of MobX, and we're going to work on selecting an activity so that we can display the activity on the right hand side once again. So we'll head back to VS Code, and if we take a look at what we're going to be replacing here, we're going to be replacing this particular function, the handle select activity. Now we're going to get the activity we're selecting from our activity store, and we'll also add the cancel action inside there as well. And what we'll also do is also create the functions to handle the opening of the form and the closing of the form as well. So we'll head to the activity store, and what we'll do is below the set loading initial is we'll add an action to select an activity, and we're going to take the ID of the activity, which of course is a string, and inside here we'll say list.selected activity is equal to list.activities.find, and then we can just say a for activity and a.id is equal to the ID. And of course we get an error, and this is TypeScript doing its thing, and it tells us that activity or undefined is not assignable to type activity or null. And the reason for this is that the find method, if it does not find the activity in our activities array, then it's going to return undefined. So we need to match what we're doing here, and instead of null we'll simply say undefined and set it initially to undefined as well, and the error goes away. And then what we'll do is we'll say cancel selected activity, and this will take no parameters, and we'll just say list.selected activity is equal to undefined. And we'll add a method to open the form. And we will take an ID in this particular method, because what we'll do is, and let's actually call this open form, and we'll take an optional ID. So we're going to add the question mark there. And if somebody chooses to edit the activity, then we're going to pass in the ID to this particular method. And if they're just creating an activity, then we don't need an ID, of course. So we'll just make that particular parameter optional. And then we'll check to see if we have an ID. So we'll use a ternary. And if we do have an ID, then we're going to say list.select activity. We'll use the method we've just created, and we'll pass in the ID. After the colon, the opposite case, we'll just say list.cancel selected activity, just in case they were editing an activity before, or displaying an activity before they decided to create an activity. And then we'll say list.edit mode is equal to true. And then we'll specify an action to close the form, and this will take no parameters, and all we're going to do here is just say list.edit mode is equal to false. So let's head over to our app component, and we're going to start removing some of this functionality from our app component itself. So we don't need these 4 functions. We can remove all of these, and we'll start to clean up our code inside here. So let's take a look at where we've got some errors. We don't need any of this being passed down to our activity dashboard. So we can also remove these properties as well, and we can remove the handle form open from our navbar. Now TypeScript is being TypeScript, and it's telling us that now we've removed them, we need to tell our activity dashboard and our navbar not to expect these functions anymore. So let's head to our navbar first of all, and we can remove the interface for the open form. We are not going to be needing this anymore inside here, so we can remove the parameters from this particular function. And then what we could do inside our navbar, just before we're returning the JSX, we'll say const activity store in curly brackets, and we'll say equals use store, and then we can, in our onClick event here, we can just say that we want our activity store and then open form. But of course our open form method expects an ID, or at least an optional ID. So we're getting the error from the onClick event here saying that we need to pass this parameters, and by not adding the parenthesis here we're getting the error. So what we need to do is wrap this in its own function, and then we can just add empty parameters or parentheses for this particular method. Then we can go back to our app, and we should have removed the error from the navbar, and we'll go to the activity dashboard, and we can remove the selected activity, select activity, cancel select from in here, and we can also remove the edit mode, open form, and close form as well. We don't need any of those, and that means we can remove a bunch of stuff from in here, and also our selected activity there as well. And what we'll do is we'll do the same again. We'll add a const, and we'll say activity store equals use store. And what we'll do is we'll remove the select activity from the activity list. We're still passing down our activities just now. That's fine, but we'll also be removing this and getting our activities directly in the activity list, but we'll do that soon. And then what we need to do is check to see if we have a selected activity and we're in edit mode. But what I'm going to do, I'm just going to come up just below the activity store, and I'm going to destructure the properties that we need from the activity store. So we're going to specify the selected activity and the edit mode, and that should remove these errors inside here. And then we can remove the cancel select activity and the open form from the activity details, and also the close form method from the activity form as well. And we don't need the activity or the selected activity here as well, so we can also remove the properties that we're passing there. And we also don't need the activity in the activity form properties, because we can once again get this directly from the store, of course. So let's see how we're doing. We've got some things to clean up still. So inside the activity list, let's just go here first of all, and we don't need the function to select an activity, so let's remove that. And inside here, what we're going to need to do is get this from our activity store. So once again, we'll say const activity store equals use store, and then we can just specify that we want to use our activity store.select activity method, and of course this still takes the activity ID, and that clears up any errors from our activity list. So we'll go back to the dashboard, and then we'll head to our activity details, and we don't need the activity from our interface or any of these props. Actually, they can all go now, and we can also remove them from the parameters here as well. And we get a bunch of errors, of course, but these are easy to solve, because now all we need to do is get them from our activity store. So we'll say const activity store equals use store, and let's go ahead and destructure the activity from this as well. And we'll say const and brackets is activity store, and what we want here is our selected activity from the store. But just to make it easy to use, and so we don't need to refactor too many things here, what we can do is add a colon, and then we can give it a name that we want to use instead of selected activity. But of course we still get additional errors here, because it's telling us the object is possibly undefined. Well, TypeScript is apparently not that smart, because if we take a look at our activity dashboard, then we're checking to see if we've got a selected activity before we display this component. So it should really understand that this cannot be undefined, otherwise we cannot display this activity. But what we'll do for now is we'll just check to see if we have the activity, and if we don't, we're just going to return. And all this is just to remove the errors at this stage, because, like I say, there's no way we cannot have an activity here. The other way, of course, would be to use the exclamation marks or quite the optional chaining on all of these different properties, but just to save ourselves some time, this will achieve the same thing. What we need as well from our activity store is the open form function and the cancel selected activity. And I've given this a different name now, so this is cancel selected activity for this on click. And the open form stays the same, and we should be free of any errors inside here. Let's just remove the activity from this as well. And we've still got an error in our activity details, and if we take a look, then it says cannot be used as a JSX component. Its return type is not a valid JSX element. Okay, so I wasn't able to get away with just returning nothing. But what we'll do, we'll need to add this in anyway soon, is we'll just return our loading component from this. Just to remove the errors, this is not going to be displayed because we're not doing anything to load an activity at this stage. If we go back to our dashboard, this one is resolved and we just need to go to our activity form now. And once again, we can remove some of these properties. We can remove the activity from inside there. And we can also remove the close form and the activity as well. And once again, we'll just go and get our activity store. So we'll say const activity store equals use store. And we'll destructure the props we need from the activity store as well. So we'll say const, and we'll just say equals activity store. And then we can go and get our selected activity and the close form from the activity store, which should remove all of the errors, and we're finally in a position to go and test. So a bit of refactoring work there, but what we should find if we go and refresh our page, we see an error. And what's this one telling us? Well, it's telling us that we've got an issue in our app.tsx, so there's still a bit more code to remove from inside there. So let's take a look. And sure enough, we've got our selected activity being passed down, and the edit mode, we don't need that anymore. And that should be good. So let's go take a look, and we can see our activity list here once again. We can refresh, that works. And if we click on view, well, nothing happens. And have a think about why nothing happens. What did we not add to our components that we need? Pause the video to have a think about why we're not seeing or observing the changes on the right hand side, and that was a clue. But of course we need to make our components observers if we want to see the updates and we want to see what's going on. So our activity dashboard, this needs to be an observer. It needs to observe our store. So we need to make these observers, and what we can do, we've got our export default function up here. Our observer takes a function as its parameter, so we'll say export default observer. Then we'll open parentheses, and at the end we'll add the closing parentheses. Now what we should find is if we take a look, and I'll just refresh the page again, we click on view and we see our activity inside there. And if we click on edit, then we get taken to our form. If we click on cancel, we go back and cancel, we remove that from there, and the create activity is showing the form in there as well. So far so good. What we'll take a look at next is the CRUD operations to create and update an activity.